It's gonna be a new thing every video. Today we're going to talk about testimonies. Testimonies are extremely important in any historical time period. They're primary sources, they're first-hand accounts. Often they will give an individual voice to a larger event. Testimonies often tap into a level of emotional connection that is important for someone to be able to appreciate history as being a living, changing thing, even as it's being studied in the present. History is always a product of the present, and testimonies and the way the testimonies are written really help to draw that emotional connection between the person studying history and the event or the individual that they're studying. And there are also problems with testimonies. They're one person's experience, they're not everyone's general experience. So trying to extrapolate the way that somebody's relationship on an individual level can be generalized into a broader whole is very dangerous. Specifically, in terms of Holocaust testimonies, they're often written after the fact. They weren't necessarily written right after. They were often written later on in the 60s, the 70s, so decades after the actual events have taken place. That's given someone time to do several things. It's given somebody time to be able to insert third-party historical data that isn't a part of their individual understanding of the events that happen to them as they happen to them. So testimonies are rarely, unless it's a diary, which we'll get to later, but if it's a diary, that's kind of a different issue. But if it is a testimony, then it's often mixed in with research that this person has done. Not at all meaning that it's any less or more valid as a primary source, you know, the account of one person's experience, because it's extremely valuable. It's one of the only access points that often we have to certain events, to specific events that otherwise might not have been documented. It is very important to have testimonies, but it's equally as important to understand the situations and the more nuanced aspects of testimonies and where they might have come from, because that's can be very different and are important to realize. One such testimony, which is actually a diary, we'll talk about how that is a little bit different, which happens to be called Riding the Storm Waves, the St. Louis Diary of Fred Buff. It looks different from this, again, interlibrary loan, saving me money at every turn. So the cover actually does look a bit different than this, but deal with it, because I have to keep this on here. This is a diary from May 13th to June 17th, so exactly the period of time when the St. Louis traveled from Hamburg to Havana, and then up the United States coast, and then back to Antwerp. This book is not entirely diary. The diary within this book is about this long. And what comes actually at the beginning, this is very interesting. This was compiled by the actual survivor. This individual who wrote the diary is a survivor. And it was compiled by him and by his son, who wrote the foreword. And it was actually his choice to include a short history that goes, you know, for the first third or so of the book. And then at the end, there is a very long, probably 15 to 20 pages or so of a glossary of just terms that are bolded throughout the book. So this offers, it's almost like a little mini textbook. There's also photos. It's a combination of photographs. It's not all photographs that the author took, but it is some family photos, but there's also official St. Louis photos. There's a collection of letters from his various speaking engagements that he has spoken at subsequently since the Holocaust. Most of them are from kind of the 90s into the early 2000s, right before this book was published. This is a very interesting book, and it's very different. But the parts of it that are the most relevant to the actual journey into St. Louis are his diary entries, which are fascinating. They also do a really good job of capturing the emotional pitch of the ship, especially as it was going to Havana, because that was very different. And then even in terms of the frequency of when he's writing, that drops off from the time that they get turned around from Havana and are searching for sanctuary somewhere so that they don't have to go back to Europe. The frequency of his diary entries also drop off naturally, as one would expect. Interesting, just really interesting. An insight into the life on the St. Louis that I haven't encountered. I don't think the only testimony from somebody who survived on the St. Louis, but I think it is possibly the only diary entry. Do not quote me on that, because someone is going to turn something up and it's going to make me look like an idiot. Read it, it's good. Fascinating in terms of layout. Testimonies need to be approached on an individual level. They are very personal insights into people's lives. Testimonies. Extremely important. Testimonies. Let's read my notes. That would be a good way to start. Testimonies are, let's start that again where I'm not staring at my notes. I did a lot of things last video. We're gonna try something different this video. Hello! Talking to my computer, filming a vlog. Oh, schmurp. Oh, I didn't put in earrings. Darn. I hope if I hit the stop button.